Hello everybody, and welcome back to the LJL officially unofficial podcast, season 3, episode 18. I am Alex, otherwise known as Lexico by MaskedSwan, the man who has been in the middle on other podcasts now. He has betrayed the trust, and I did the same. Samuel Nicholas Hapgood. Hello, sir. How are you, mate?
Oh, nice to see you again on a slightly different podcast once more. We've been doing the rounds recently. I know, right? It is actually as well. It's wild.
We've been doing that. The man who didn't betray you all, Nymaera. So how are
you betrayed me?
Yeah, exactly.
What the fuck, guys? Yeah, how have I been? Well, been busy the last week because it was the wrapping up of EU Masters. So
Yes.
I was very fortunate to have my second finals cast of that. Did it in spring, did it in summer, and then of course had to do that with I had to do that with Sam. Only had to cast a 5-game series between Heretics and BDS Academy as Spain finally beat France. Oh no, that was such a drag. No, that was really fun. That was really cool. That was like that was my last like Riot broadcast of the year. So it was really cool to kind of cap off this year and to I mean I'll probably be doing bits and pieces around that, but that was really cool. And yeah, I don't know what to do now. I don't have as much work. I'm kind of experiencing off season as a procaster for the first time, which is
wild.
It's an experience. So there's that. Besides that, I bought a guitar, which you can see in the background there, which goes right next to my lightsaber, which I also bought recently, and it's over there, and I'm really tempted to go turn it on, but I'm not, to save you all.
Well, if you wander off at some point to go to the toilet and then mysteriously comes back with a lightsaber, I won't be too surprised. But I mean, ladies and gentlemen, go follow him on Twitter. Honestly, more so follow him on his TikTok, because that's where the banger content's coming out at the moment.
Yeah, that's where I'm actually fueling all my creative energies now. I don't have a broadcast to be on.
Well, until we get you fully into streaming. That's the plan.
I'm working my way into that.
Mate, make some YouTube videos. I've been making YouTube. You can make YouTube, and you can actually make it with actually more of like an actual analytic with a big brain knowledge. I'm just a random pundit who just is unfavorably biased always towards the LJL. But, I mean, hey, there's not a lot of those out there. So
only a few.
It's like they're all here. Crazy. Sam, how are you doing, buddy, though, as well?
Yeah, doing pretty well. It's been a weird mix of a lot of the EU Masters stuff for obvious reasons. I was kind of doing quarters and semis and finals and all of that jazz, which was very exciting, but a lot of work. And all the while also prepping for a couple of these podcasts. So I did a round table last night with a few of the other minor regions guys. So the LLA guys helped that one out. So shout out to Recollect and Black Bloxer for organizing a lot of that. And then obviously myself, you, and a few others did a couple ones with the sort of like unofficial broadcast one where we had some of the VCS guys on. We had Kitty on from over in the LCO. We had Pyro on from over in the PCS. And we had some really good chats about what our thoughts are on the minor regions going into play-ins and play-ins in general. And that's been really cool to sort of start getting some opinions around on how we feel things are going. And between a lot of preparatory work for play-ins and then EU Masters as well, I have just been doing a lot of work. And outside of that, I've been playing Persona 5, which has been good fun. But like that's been my life.
Any video games for you, Alex, as well, or are you
Total
just been
War Warhammer 3?
Great
I was doing a bit of that. I've been
Jesus, you're both playing like hardcore games where it's like lots of time is required.
I put in a load of turns into that when on a campaign on like the new like huge world map. So that was something I was doing. I then have been playing. So Genshin had like a big update recently, so I've been playing a bit more of that. And I've been playing a lot more League again. Playing a lot more League again as well, actually. So, what's happened is I realized that some people had a higher amount of achievements on me about, like, there's a certain challenge in League right now because they had a load of challenges. There's a certain one about Magi Soul Stealer and stacking for 20 minutes. And, like, I can't really face myself as the Magi's book salesman if people are suddenly getting more, like, Magi stacks than me. So I've been just playing. So I've been playing Magi's Hecarim. I've been playing.
Oh, you dirty abuser.
Well, the thing is that, like, it's not good, but it's just good enough to make it, like, not trolling. So I can get away with it.
Decent on the W.
And I can just use Hecarim as a broken champion. So I can do that, and then I'm just playing a load of AP junglers. So I've been doing that a lot. Reconnecting with some friends I haven't talked to in a very long time, which is cool through that, because League has been my main social thing for a long ass time now at this point. So that's been really cool. So I've been playing a lot of League as well in the Run Out Worlds.
Nice. Sam, any other games for you as well? P5, obviously.
Obviously, P5's a big one. Aside from that, not hugely right now, but that's mainly because between that and League, I've just not had a lot of time for anything else. And Persona 5 is a big game, so
It is.
I've been yeah.
Well, lads, let me inform you. While you've been doing that, in my sleep, as I grind, I achieve Mythic on MTGA. Because
Let's go.
in my sleep, I always said I could, and then finally a deck that I had to wait for a deck to be enjoyable for me because I wasn't gonna do it any other way.
When it was released, I played Arclight Phoenix Izzet deck, like red blue, and I was doing pretty well at that. But the game systems hadn't really been put in place at that point, and I kind of gave up on it before it really got to that point. But I really appreciate that achievement. That's some dedication. Go you.
I mean, it was the interesting thing, and I saw like a meme on Reddit, and I kind of realized that Magic is just that game where I can just sit down and if I want to be good, I can be good, right? It's that game for me because I looked on the Reddit and there was the memes of going, oh my god, they hit to the high ranks, and then it's got the crying face, and I just have to play aggro because it's the only way they can win, and like their skill ranking, and I'm just like, I'll just play a medium to hard deck that requires good play, and I'll just win with like a 70% win rate through every game, and I just won't lose because I know how to play cards better. Also, a lot of people in lower elos just don't understand how to play their cards correctly.
Right.
I'm good at Magic. Surprise, ladies and
Former
gentlemen.
pro, by the by.
Semi-pro, not full-time. Couldn't go full-time. Maybe one day, who knows? Maybe I could do casting. I think I'd be great.
You'd be a great Magic
I think you should really
caster.
start up an amateur broadcast of some
Magic
like,
the
niche
Gathering.
region.
Yeah.
And then you should like keep like improving over the course
I'm
of
not sure
several years.
Japan counts as a niche region for Magic, though.
Well,
Oh, it's ugly. It's second region.
I know, right?
Because Europe,
we'll workshop it.
arguably,
Europe's the niche region.
Oh, Europe officially unofficial.
Well, hilariously, actually, like Paris and Italy, France and Italy, but it's just Paris because that's where everybody plays, and the whole of Italy plays Magic. Apparently, I don't know why, it's really weird. But they're the only two places in Europe that are really worth talking about for Magic in Europe.
Does the UK not have much going? No.
We're not in Europe anymore, Sam. What are you talking about?
Continentally. Continentally,
Wow.
yes. Politically, slightly more problematic.
I don't want to touch that even more with a barge pole. With that said, though, ladies and gentlemen, we are the LJL officially unofficial broadcast. Outside of that, what have I been doing? Stuff. I played Magic. I'm trying to play League. I've been making YouTube videos about worlds and stuff, so follow me because I'm probably going to try and make more worlds content, and I'm trying to get myself revved up for a show that I said I would do at the very beginning of this seasons of podcasts, I believe, or maybe the end of season 2, where I would have random people come onto a show with me and talk. I'm probably going to start doing that at some point.
Cool.
That'll be fun. I mean, I'm getting more connected with more people in the League scene, especially over the last few months, so it should be good fun. And obviously, these two faces I'm sure I will pull them on once or twice regularly.
We don't have a choice. There's like, he's got like he's got so much blackmail on us now. We have to do what he tells us. Or clever.
Wow.
Am I wrong?
I'm trying to think.
I want to know what I know now.
I'm sure there's one or two things in there.
Yeah, we've been doing this for long enough. I'm fairly certain there's enough footage of all of us doing something
we've been,
stupid.
Rolling out of bed at like 4 a.m. or 9 a.m. for like 2.5, 3 years at this point. Like, we're all grumpy. We're all in like various like states of unawakeness. I'm sure something's cropped up at some point.
I genuinely thought you were going to say states of undress, which would definitely count as blackmail.
That's the secret. That is the secret of remote broadcasting, of course. You don't actually know what you see this. You don't see
no idea.
If we don't stand up, they don't know.
Exactly, they have no idea.
Yeah, never have a standing desk setup. That's the key.
See, that's where one of our own Caster Oak went wrong. Oak had a standing desk. There we go. That's where it all went wrong. But
get it together, Oak.
With that said, though,
let's get into it.
Episode. So this episode, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to be recapping over the LJL playoffs format, how it kind of went down, talking about the main points around semifinals and finals, or rather juggernaut match and finals more than anything else. Semifinals has a few interesting things to say, but we'll see if we get onto that. once we've covered that and kind of the journey of Detonation Focus Me, we're going to probably transition over, as we all suggested in this pre-note document. I'm going to talk about the matchups for them over at play-ins. There's going to be some spicy takes, probably some cold takes, and we'll probably figure out how we feel about it, and then also just talk about our general expectations, as well as also predictions. If you gentlemen have already done your predictions, me and Initialise have already done those before. So, Nymaera,
I'm
we
sure
might
I could go
force-
through the matchups and.
We can start. You can do it while we're talking about it. Easy enough.
absolutely, yeah, there, yeah.
Oh,
We don't.
I vaguely got it in my head anyway, so.
Yes.
Perfect. And then, ladies and gentlemen, if you're listening to this live, you can ask questions to us. At the end, we might do a brief bit of Q and A. But with that said, gentlemen, I think it's about time that we get onto our first main topic while I try and find where the graphic is. There it is.
Found it.
How LJL playoffs actually went down for the LJL. And gentlemen, obviously they beat Detonation Focus Me beat Sengoku Gaming. But a lot of points, if you just listen to random podcasts or random talks about DFM, and it's not from us three specifically, a lot of points are being forgotten about. A lot of people are saying DFM flattened Sengoku Gaming, destroyed them, dismantled them, and that is fair to a point. It's fair if you just look at it from a results-orientated thinking.
Yeah,
that's fair. But agreed, Nymaera. And why shouldn't they do that?
Because when you look at the story of this summer, it has been about DFM actually in a lot of ways catching back up to Sengoku in very key regards, particularly for me in their mid and late game team fighting. Sengoku actually really had the number in a number of instances. I think you could see that Sengoku had found ways that they could draft in ways to make DFM fairly uncomfortable, in ways where DFM either had a comp which couldn't proficiently mid to late game fight, and then Sengoku were good enough to punish DFM on an overstep so that they had to mid to late game team fight from a deficit. Now, I do think that across the board, if you were to rate both teams out of 10, DFM clearly the better team, but Sengoku were just above them or just able to put themselves above them in certain ways to make it very competitive. I think this plays into a really bigger narrative in terms of how most people will look at the LJL as a one-team region of DFM. And I think that really doesn't tell the story, because DFM have had to contend with, particularly in the last year, Rascal Jester and Sengoku, finding different ways to actually really make them question the way that they play. DFM are a very versatile team. They found ways around it. But looking at particularly some of the series in here, the finals being a 3-0 was more a testament to DFM finally understanding how Sengoku were trying to beat them, rather than them just being like, oh, they just slaughtered them, nothing else to it. There were several steps before this, which made this a notable result.
Yeah, and I think particularly you could see the difference between DFM in the beginning of summer, DFM towards the end of summer.
Their first loss at the very beginning of summer.
Right, and then DFM coming into playoffs. Because actually DFM in playoffs did handle Sengoku Gaming pretty handedly. Aside from the one loss in the upper round bracket, pretty much all the other games were relatively clear.
As well, which I'll pull out, but yes, on that.
Yes, and there was one other moment I think there was where Ebby had to fix it with some good Trendemir play, if I remember correctly, if I'm thinking of the one you're thinking of.
No, I think it was game... Because they lost game... Did they lose game 1 versus Sengoku?
No, it was game 2.
Game 2, okay, so I think it was one of the games I think it might have been game 3, where DFM have this historical thing of where they lack clear engage conditions, they will sometimes just try and force it, and Sengoku know that they'll force it, so they're just like, heh, disengage, and they just beat them on the overstep.
So you're talking way back in regular season here,
No, this is one of the games that DFM actually won, but there were a couple of fights even in that game where they were like, well, we're going to force it, and it gave questions, because they lost a couple of fights from a huge advantage. Even though they ended up winning that game,
I'm not sure.
One of these stylistic errors.
To...
It's one of these stylistic errors where it gets a little bit funky.
Might be game number 4. I'm just looking at the team compositions, and most of them, Ebby played like Ornn or Sejuani, so I'm like, they always had it, except for the one game where he played Gwen. But then he went 5-0-5, so probably not that one, actually, now I think about it, because that's a 28-minute game, so
If you go to game 3, at about 26 minutes in, you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. They have like a 6,000 gold lead, and it's like, wow, cool, we can engage, and it's like, wait, no,
this is the one where the Vi goes a little deep, I remember.
No, they were gone.
Steel goes too deep against what.
Oh, I'm thinking game 2 where they lost. Sorry, I've got the wrong.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Okay, yeah.
along this whole conversation.
Interestingly, I remember having that conversation with you. Interesting.
But
Yes.
even though DFM were at a huge advantage, there are sometimes a stylistic error where they have where it's like, okay, one person has to engage. Wait, we don't have enough engage, and it gets a little bit funky after that point. And Sengoku realized that they got that on lock, and they were good enough to punish DFM at that point. And I think it's important to note that there are teams good enough to punish DFM in the region, and it's not like DFM just blindly walk through the region every time.
Well, I would argue they haven't done that consistently, really, since 2021. And that was partly because they were just the juggernaut powerhouse. Like 2020, they struggled horrendously against three separate teams, actually, arguably. The Sengoku Gaming, P3 Sport, and Rascal Jester. 2021 was a bit of a different year, simply because the region also had a bit of a shake-up internally, moving Aria over. Obviously, the trade-off and everything, even when DFM were looking, quote, perfect form in summer season in 2021, they still didn't look unbeatable.
I still think they've generally been the best team in the region. It's just what we have noticed is there have been other teams that have actually been contenders, which hasn't always been true. And especially since the rework to the league came in, and people like Unsold Stuff Gaming and for good reason, Rampage, for example, left the region. It took a little while for other orgs to come in and be competitive again, whereas DFM remained.
V3 in summer.
I'm saying 2019 was really not for a while.
So
and
basically,
even for the first half of 2020, and even honestly for 2020 spring, until Sengoku pulled it on towards the end of the split, the first 2/3 of that split were very DFM focused, and then we had the questions in playoffs, and then the patch change came in, and DFM were right back on top, and Sengoku looked lost. So I'm not even convinced with that one either.
That's fair, Sam, because I remember even saying on this podcast, like episode 2 or episode 3, is Siros maybe the most defining mid laner in the region, just because you have to ban 3 champions against him. And now that wouldn't happen. That would just not fly in this region.
That was when you were voting as MVP, even though he wasn't the best player. It's like, well, you're still banning all the champions against him, so that's value.
That was a weird.
That value's important.
Fun times.
But that wouldn't be the case anymore, and I don't think any mid laner could really require that, because I think the LJL has improved. I mean, maybe it's just us lads. Like, we came into this region, and now the region is more than a one-team region. There we go. That's brushing it up. Outside of that, though, let's talk a little bit about that finals, though, because it was a 3-0, as you've mentioned, Nymaera. But there, as you mentioned, it was more partly DFM more theory crafting and solving Sengoku Gaming more than Sengoku Gaming kind of losing to their own follies, and there was like a top caliber, and our general understanding was that the mid lane was going to be very competitive, and like Jet had been arguably seen as the kind of rival to Yaharong. Obviously, Paz is that only other top laner that's constantly gone to international events if Ebby doesn't go. So there was a lot of NT Mr. Consistent when it comes to playoffs. Vital, obviously, jumping in for that spot of Honey. Honey, we still don't know anything about, ladies and gentlemen. If we did, we would love to tell you, but we don't know what happened with them. But Sengoku Gaming, like, it still was a 40-minute game into a 30-minute game, and then 26-minute game when DFM looked very, very comfortable by the end of the series, but it wasn't kind of... Just saying that DFM were the better team is just missing so much.
It's just very simplistic. I think particularly when it comes to a minor region, if you step in as someone that doesn't watch the region, just say, "Oh, they're the better team." Like, particularly because it is a region that you don't have, the community doesn't have the built-up familiarity with. That doesn't mean much. It doesn't actually mean much. It's literally just that they won. That's all you're telling me. It's not like how I could tell you about Rogue in terms of like how the international broadcaster more likely to know that a team like Rogue played. They played a style which was very good for their solo laners becoming very enabled by Malorang's early pathing to make sure that they could stay in lane, stuff like that. And even that's quite a complex thing, right? In some ways, that's quite a specific thing. The broader community knows about that. If I were to ask someone, okay, well, why were Loud the best team in the CB lore? Would you be able to tell me anything? Actually, most people wouldn't. And the same goes for Dead Nation Focus Me. Why are DFM the best? What did they have to do to win? What we were just saying about Sengoku is something that you won't hear, actually, from most people around the community. Now, you might do if they had, like, people like us or people that put a significant amount of time into watching it, but that is one of these big things where it's just like, you can't stop it just saying they were the better team, because it doesn't tell anything specific, and the community can't rebuff you on that or find their own, like, latent knowledge to fill in the gaps.
And I think... especially with that, you've got to start questioning like why were they the better team and to what extent? Because for example, what people might see from watching the upper bracket and the last game and the finals would say, oh, Yarong's clearly better than Jet because Jet kind of got trashed, particularly in the upper bracket finals, and that wasn't true for large parts of the split. Now, I think you could possibly make the argument that Yarong really improved from spring to summer, particularly, watching over the course of the year. Jet was phenomenal. But then there's the game that got cancelled versus where there was the remake in the second game in the regular season versus DFM, where Jet kind of got a bit destroyed there. But then you look at the regular result afterwards, and it was a much closer affair. And those kind of things come through, and you start having some questions about what's going on. And
well, and
then
in
you go
that
and look
first
at
match,
then you go and look at the kind of the upper bracket stuff here, and Jet was kind of put to task. Really had a pretty rough couple series, and that's credit.
So.
That's credit, honestly, to DFM for handling this guy because no one had been able to answer him practically. The Hawks did it once because they had Dasher and he's quite good, and again they've got some very good early game plans, but otherwise it had been a real problem point for the LJL teams about how do you deal with this Sengoku mid laner. And DFM, on the whole, despite drafting a little bit different, Ornn for Ebby was not something we saw a huge amount of in the regular split, for example. But they did
skill
start to go
checking
towards, they did go towards the 3-4 item scaling, get Yarong and a control mage, hold Jet accountable in lane, outscale, rather than playing hyper aggressive in some of these games. And they did that as well. They played the Lucian Nami in the finals, for example, to great effect. But
I did really like the adaptation from Sengoku to lock the Scion into the Ornn game too, though. Because it's like, you
nice
have backline access, but you're not going to have any follow-up into the backline because you got to get through Scion.
That was
really good.
That was fun. Exactly, yeah.
Well, like, for God's sake, Ebby had one of his... I mean, Ebby had one of his largest champion pools this summer that we've ever seen in a regular season. Like there is so much, like Aharong was doing this as well. Like they was trying so much. DFM don't have one playstyle, people, because they didn't have to play one playstyle. They can play the 5v5. They can play the split push. And I think this is going to be one of these things when we come into it. Ebby can play Fiora if he has to. He absolutely can. He's
playing Lilia top. He's playing Vladimir. Not many other top players are doing that. He's playing Mordekaiser.
Is one thing you will notice on a lot of broadcasts when it comes to international is that you will try to see broadcasts try to very succinctly categorize a team and say, what is this team? How do they play? And a team like DFM absolutely stumps that because they are the most versatile team outside of the major regions. I'll stand by that. I'll back it up. Because you look at someone like Ebby, someone like, I guess Yarong's another good example too, where like they just play fundamentally different styles from game to game. Even in the finals, you can see this, right, where Ebby is happy to play the Ornn outscale duty, and then actually he's got a Gwen in the back pocket. Actually, he'll still play his Gnar, he'll still play his Renekton.
He's one of the best Trindamirs still in the world, by the way, on Korean solo queue.
So when you see a broadcast try to narrow down what DFM is, you can't do it by saying this is the style that they play. Now, they have some tendencies which carry across that, but they are not limited by that. In fact, I would actually say the whole story of DFM is how they've made themselves more versatile over years.
Yeah, and like I had this thing when I was talking with the other two podcasts, like how do I explain this team? And it was like a couple of the numbers that really stand out that's kind of scary. You look at things like the damage share, and normally that tends to be tilted to 2 lanes or 2 roles. So you'll probably have something like an AD carry plus another role, largely. Be a mid laner. In certain metas before, it's been things like the junglers had an unusually high share, if like Canyon's been really popping off for Damwon or whatever.
And very rarely top lane bosses.
Yeah, exactly. You kind of sometimes have those kinds of it tends to be 2 lanes. DFM are quite unusual because their mid jungle and their mid AD carry and top lane are all around 30%. They're all kind of roughly in that margin of pretty similar damage shares, or like 26. They're all kind of similar-ish. I need to go look at the numbers again. And you look at Udapon's got a slightly higher amount of DPM because he's an AD carry, so he's like top 4 in the league. But he's at like 670. Then you got Ebby and Yaharong are both at like 605 and 615 DPM. And it's like, they're all actually pretty similar. And what that tells you is they can basically play through any lane they care to and have a solid carry performance from all of it. Especially when you then look at things like the gold difference at 15, and the second place gold difference in the LJL at 15 was about 700. DFM were 2,793 gold up at 15 on average. They were up at 2,000 gold ahead of the second place team. So they were smashing early game and then sharing out the damage potential throughout the squad really, really well. That's a lot of flexibility and damn good early game coordination to pull off those kind of numbers across a split that's a triple round robin. That's very well done.
And remember, this is still the team that is playing with Udapon. This is the guy who could genuinely pull out Cartha's bot lane if it is the most broken thing in DFM a practice for it.
He used to be a Syndra bot player.
Right? Like, and his best friend is a Ziggs main and a Karma main, and Detonation focused me. Even after this season, I think it's fair to say, gentlemen, they don't have a playstyle. They can do what the meta will require of them, and each of the players in their designated roles are more than happy to facilitate the team to accomplish their goal, which, ladies and gentlemen, is to get groups again. That's all DFM care about. Get back to groups, back-to-back minor region groups. That's huge. Remember, 2020, Unicorns of Love made it. DFM, 2021. 2022, if we have another minor region make it out, at this point, can pundits on the official broadcast please start seeing trends? I know 2 times it's a coincidence, 3 times it's a fact. Okay.
maybe you should give $1 every time it happens. They can make the Doofenshmirtz.
God Almighty, I would be a very rich man at the end of that. Or very poor if no minor region make it out.
It gets a bit crazy.
Yeah.
I do.
Slight correction. I looked at the numbers, by the way. It's about 26% was the actual numbers. 26% for Udapon, 24.5. They're all about right. Anyway, the numbers stand.
But like. This is actually going to twin really nice into the next topic that we've got. So I'm going to hold off a little bit on that, unless you want to move on right now. Because, I mean, we've kind of talked a little bit about playoffs, right? Where, I mean, end of the day, we talked a lot about DFM and Sengoku. We talked a little bit about how they've been pushed by other teams. Of course, the Hawks made it actually very far this time. They're a team which chronically underperformed. So it's good to see them reach that far. But I think it's good just like, even though we are looking into worlds and to play-ins, it's nice to just add a little bit of color to the canvas and show that actually, there are other teams in the LJL. Actually, there are teams which will push DFM in different regards, even if you consider DFM to be the only team you're ever going to watch from the LJL. It's important to understand what they've been taught by the other teams.
Yeah, I mean, that kind of rivalry between Sengoku and DFM was really exciting to watch the split. It was a bit sad to watch Rascal Jesters completely capitulate for large parts of the split, and that's frustrating. And I think particularly the mid-jungle there was a real sad sight. They just didn't feel comfortable in the meta. But Hawks kind of took on the mantle there and did a very good job, and an admirable 3rd place finish for that squad. But yeah,
in the regular season, they were definitively the 3rd best team in the region, by the way, ladies and gentlemen.
I think especially after a pretty mediocre start to the split as well, they did a really good job with it.
They did.
And then, I think it would be a disservice to both DFM and Sengoku to basically say, DFM walked playoffs, and sort of, yes, but with the context of how tough it was to get there, with how tightly matched those teams were through the regular season, and how much DFM improved over the season as well. Like, holy moly, they came a long, long way from the beginning, from doing fine to actually being pretty damn disgusting. Is you don't want to undersell that kind of journey.
Yeah, and honestly, I think something I said we weren't going to say too much about, but that semi-finals match, honestly, the fact that Sengoku got pushed a little bit, but then they pushed back a lot more with their own definitive playstyle, which is very much play around Vital and figure out how to win the game through that, or use
Make
Jet.
sure that Paz is not in an interactive lane matchup.
Yeah, that guy can't carry games, but he can be a brick wall.
Remember when V3 went to Worlds and they decided that Paz was going to be their main carry? That was such a strange decision.
I don't want to talk about that Kassadin going top lane and then Paz fucking it up horribly with that ace. That was
a lot of stuff there.
Yeah, but we got Crabber out of it next year, so it was worth it.
True. There we go.
Hey, we sacrifice things. Are there any players? So with that point that I was trying to make before I got myself sidetracked, which was impressive. Hawks tried, and they very much pushed Sengoku to prove themselves, but prove themselves they did with a 3-1 performance, which then was far more interesting for us at that exact time, ladies and gentlemen, because we thought maybe Sengoku could actually force them a bit further. We have seen them in the past potentially do that. It didn't happen. It was a 3-0, but was Sengoku got pushed, which means DFM were getting pushed, which means everyone's getting pushed and the whole region's getting better overall, and the top 3 teams kind of kept themselves in that little pocket, especially with the Hawks decisively beating Rascal Jester, who just couldn't get their playoff buff going after having a full 5-game banger against Crest Gaming Act. That series is not a banger. Don't go back and watch it. It was
entertaining.
Yes. If that's your definition of banger, I think that's fair. are there any players you would like to highlight from the LJL regular season, gentlemen? Just for people, if they ever hear the names. Obviously, I've mentioned a few of the Sengoku members of highlights.
I'll throw this one out. Hybrid did a phenomenal job on Crest Gaming Act this split. Holy moly, that guy was putting in a shift, especially with how reliant CGA were on Hybrid to carry them to the victories they got. He basically became their playstyle, and we've got a lot of very good bot laners in the LGL. It's probably our strongest role. Hybrid really put his name out, and I know, in all honesty, I seriously considered putting him in for an MVP vote purely because of how valuable he was for CGA in getting the wins they got. Credit to him. He and Nap were the superstars on that team, really. It wasn't enough, and again, the coherency and of teams like Sengoku Gaming and DFM, where they've all got very good players, and all those very good players work together in some beautiful harmony to create great things, is a little bit beyond one player, shall we say. But when CGA were on, it was very exciting to watch Hybrid do his thing.
I'm not going to name any more players outside of the ones which you did, because I think that there are some wider points which kind of like this all wraps itself up into, which is in terms of like the players which DFM after coming to Worlds have faced in terms of their regional stuff is a lot of very good bot laners for one thing, and a lot of teams which have really strong ability to play through mid and late game objective and larger team fights as well. That's typically what we see out of the LGL teams, and it is players like this which do enable that. I guess if there was one person I want to shout, I guess Once has had a really, really good year.
Yeah.
Once jungler for Sengoku Gaming. He was kind of memed as kind of like a just like the permanent.
He deserved those
permafight
memes
jungler.
from his previous team.
He really did. But then coming into this year, he's really developed in terms of the amount of poise that he plays with, an actual just a level of just enough reservation to make like the aggressive plays work out as well. So I think he's been a really interesting to player as watch. But again, all of this kind of wraps up into this larger picture of DFM actually has a number of very high level players that they have faced to actually get out of their region as well. Now, it turns out they have a lot of very good high-level players on their own roster too. They're not lacking in that regard. But there's still a lot of players out there in the LJL which have given them things to think about.
And because I keep seeing it floating around, I can't tell if it's memes and shitposting because of how poor your jokes are or not. But DFM having 3 Koreans is not a new thing, ladies and gentlemen. Remember, we did that at 2021. Okay?
Yes.
Yeah, and Steel, so to actually, it's probably worth explaining why that is the way it is as well. Steel has been in the LJL for a very, very, very long time now. He's effectively
very long time.
He's in a similar position to someone like Bjergsen or Jensen, who've just been in this region for so long. They have got residency, and they didn't even.
He's far more
even
just an LJL player.
He was there for such a long time. I think he's been there since 2014, maybe. Maybe a little bit. Was it 2016?
2017 is when he came over. He did that brief time in Ever 8, remember? But then he was straight back to DFM in between the 2 seasons. He only played on like a
so he's
random
been
tournament.
in the LJL for large periods of it, so at least kind of 5 years straight-ish now. He got residency summer of 2021, which is how they managed to get Arya on the roster. So he speaks fluent Japanese. He's been in Japan for a long time. In fact, I think he might have like standard Japanese residency at this point. Even I'm not quite sure. So like,
I hope he does, because that means we don't have to send him off to Korean service.
Yeah.
Pew, pew!
So he is like, for all of his nationality being Korean, he is an LJL player. And so you can, if you want to make that accusation, it's kind of in bad faith, the same way it is to make the same comment about someone like Bjergsen or Jensen when they have dedicated so much of their life to a particular region.
Agreed. Right. Well, with that said, gentlemen, I think it's about time we go over to our next topic, which is...
Let's go for it.
Playing stage is upon us. Now, ladies and gentlemen, if you're somehow living under a rock, and just in case you are, we're going to have to very quickly explain playoffs. No, play-in stage, not playoffs. That's already happened. Play-ins. So, I have a lovely graphic, but for our audio listeners out there, there are 3 different pools of team. Pool 3 are all minor region teams of Chief, Istanbul Wildcats, Istris Gaming, and Loud. Pool 2 teams are a mix of Major, Emerging, and Detonation Focus. Me, because that's how good we are, ladies and gentlemen. Mad Lions, Evil Geniuses for both the LCS and LEC. Saigon Buffaloes for VCS, and Detonation Focus me for the LJL. And Pool 1 teams are all major regions and Beyond Gaming. So an Emerging region, I'm really confused about the way they've done these pools, honestly, this year. This has been something I'm really bugged by, but hey, that's beside the point, and probably not really much of a conversation for us outside of maybe it's another show that probably we should do, which is completely disconnected from this, but we'll talk about that another day. RNG, DRX, Fnatic, and Beyond Gaming. They were then drawn into two groups. We've got Group A, Group B. We're not going to really talk too much about Group B, so I'm just going to quickly rattle off who is in that group. It's DRX, RNG, Saigon Buffaloes, Mad Lions, Istanbul Wildcats, and Idris. And the Group A, which is the group we care so much more about, which is Fnatic, Beyond, Detonation Focus Me, EG, Loud, and Chiefs.
Yeah, we're mainly going to mainly talk about Group A, guys. Put it that way.
How the format works is it's a best of one format. First seed will auto qualify through to the group stage of the main, the quote main event. But let's be real, this is part of Worlds, so it should be the same caliber as everybody else. That's a Riot thing. Just my 5-second thoughts on that one. Obviously, so first seed auto qualify, second seed gets to sit above everybody else and gets to watch the best of 5 from the opposite side. That means, for instance, if Saigon, Buffalo, and Mad Lions play a BO5, and then Saigon, Buffalo make it through, they will then have to play the second place of Group A in that scenario, assuming DRX and RNG are first and second, and then vice versa for Group A. Assuming Loud and Chiefs were third and fourth in this hypothetical, they would then have to play either DRX and RNG.
And then the winner of their second best of 5 then goes through to groups.
Yes. Thank you so much for that clarification. I definitely missed that.
Yeah. So your third, fourth, the third, fourth fight each other. Then
and
you've got to face the final boss.
The labyrinth, and then actually when they get to the center,
labyrinth part's my best part.
They need to win chess against an elderly.
Is that a magic reference
spirit.
again?
Yeah.
Oh, dude, all the chess drama recently has been just.
It's been like I don't even know who I agree with at this point with the chess drama. We'll leave this alone. It's
let's leave this alone, and let's go on to this first topic. So DFM are at Worlds. So
yes,
let's start off. Minor regions have been given a few rough rides. Let's be real with storylines and everything. And let's fix those largest mistakes. Let's address the things that people out there are seeing, hearing, and watching, and maybe give some clarification or correctness, because some of this shit is real fucking tilting, and I've been tweeting out some based as fuck stuff sometimes.
Yeah, this is our, not going to call it the salty segment, but we're going to be addressing some stuff that we think potentially might just be wrong that people have got stuck in their heads about the LJL. Because at the end of the day, if anyone's going to debunk them, it may as well be us, because we've zeroed in on it better than anyone else in the international community. So if we have any thoughts about that stuff, we'll try and say it.
So I've been hearing the idea that DFM are a one-team region.
Oh, LJL is a one-team region, and it's named DFM.
Oh, no, DFM is a one-team. No, you're right.
I could see someone making that call. It's going to be very aggravating. Yeah.
Yes.
No, the region is called LJL, and the team is DFM, and there's more than one team there. That's all right. I promise you.
Yeah. I think it's things to watch out for when it gets to around Worlds time. You see XYZ person say this about LJL/DFM. Yeah, I do not think it is correct that the LJL is a one-team region. There are so many caveats to this. I feel like the only way you say this is, and this is one of the real extreme examples where the results-based analysis, you look at it and you see all the wins, you're like, oh, DFM are just crazy. They're super dominant. No one has ever gotten close to beating them, blah, blah, blah. And the results will quite clearly tell you that. But that kind of betrays what's actually happened, which means that you probably just not watched the region. Because at that point, you're missing some of these huge matches and these teams which have actually stylistically stumped DFM for periods of time, where they'll look at them and go like, they've kind of got our number for a little bit. And it'll be in different ways. And as we said, on the whole, DFM are very versatile and they're very good at adapting. But for moments of time, and it only has to be 1 or 2 best of 5s, and then suddenly they're out, a team has gotten the better of them. So, yeah, what are the thoughts on the one-team region stuff, guys?
I mean, it's not true. I think, don't get me wrong, there is definitely an upper echelon of strong teams, and it's not like the whole of the LGL is competent. We have got a few teams, particularly the bottom, who really did struggle, and even some of our lower end playoff teams weren't exactly exciting this team around. But the top 3 or 4 teams, or top 3 teams, have been genuinely good. The top 2 teams have been great, and then 4th, 5th have had moments of brilliance, and we've seen what their ceilings can be. They're just significantly more exploitable. And I mean, like, you compare that to somewhere like the LEC, and you kind of go, okay, top 3 teams are pretty competent, but honestly, it's been a bit messy at the top of the LEC. I'm not entirely sure who's good at the
LEC didn't
minute.
have a top, really. It was just like everyone was in
Mm.
contention. It was ridiculous.
it was
Particularly
wild.
the split. What was interesting about that, though, is that it doesn't necessarily make the region better. That's what the players are saying. It's like, it's close, but we don't like it.
Yeah.
Well, you know another region which was the exact same as that? LCS. Their playoffs were 5-game series every single time, and from a fan, an objective fan, it was great.
It was very entertaining.
As a regional supporter and hopium for like my second backup region, I was terrified. I am terrified for the LCS coming into this Worlds. This is not a good Worlds for them, and it's being held there.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. I have some faith in Cloud9, but that's probably long-term soft spot for them because I used to follow that team back when it was the OG lineup. But I think they've at least stylistically got a little bit more to work with. I have more worries about the other NA teams. I will be interested to see how Evil Geniuses do in Group A because with is this a good moment to do the housekeeping in terms of roster stuff for Group A? Or do you want to leave that?
No, this was just about this was about the one team region stuff.
Region stuff, yeah. So So I know we've just gone a big tangent here. So
I mean,
exactly.
the based comment about it is honestly we could send Sengoku Gaming, and I would honestly think Sengoku Gaming could definitely be a 3rd, 4th place team in this Group A.
Oh yeah.
Which I mean is more of a statement of me saying I think we could legitimately, assuming DFM, and this is on assumption, ladies and gentlemen. So just walk and talk with me here, gentlemen. They make group stage again. At what point do the LJL almost deserve a 2nd seed at some point? Even if it's just in the play-in stage, if that's what we want to do, because we've now got precedents, remember, of 2 LEC teams. So they are saying that Pandora's box has now been opened, gentlemen. We are saying we're allowed to have 2 teams from the same region now, and it just means they're in different groups. Hey, no. They've set this precedent, and I hope they keep with it.
The question would be who gets dropped for it, right? Because at the minute, LCL
LEC
weren't there.
Seed.
So that the LEC don't have the 4th seed for LEC is from No, it's from LCL.
Yeah, it's from LCL.
Yeah.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, I think.
But let's be honest. I mean, like, I doubt that LCL is returning anytime soon, just with the way that world politics is happening. So, well, I mean, that's the speculation, right? But this stuff tends to take a while to fix itself, especially something of this scale, which is happening in the Ukraine, obviously.
And our hearts go out to those affected.
Massively so.
Yeah, for sure, all of that. But like, so in terms of what that means for us, as much as like it's a weird, small, insignificant thing, yeah, it probably does mean that we're gonna have to deal with like an extra slot hanging around in some way. Now, I do think that there is a larger issue in terms of like, I can't remember for the life of me who mentioned it in terms of like, it's kind of a little bit weird that you can remove a minor region slot and just invite like another major region team and it actually ups the level of the tournament or something. It's like, shouldn't really be the way that it is. Problem with that is that if you follow that logic too far, you're just gonna have every freaking LPL playoffs team in there.
Yeah,
Right?
you have all the LPL teams. Like you're just gonna have like
okay, at what point do you draw the line?
here now,
I think you need to like draw a line somewhere and be like, all right, this is what we're doing in terms of like global representation and whatever. I do think that minor regions do need second seeds in some format. Now, do I think that has to be Worlds? No, I did raise the issue sometime, or the idea some time ago in terms of like what happens with maybe bringing back a Rift Rivals to help out minor region seeding. Gives you that international experience for some of the second seeds as well. But like at Worlds, I don't know if you can justify LJL 2 over LEC 4. I don't know about that. That's
well, I mean, if assuming obviously if Damnation Focus Me somehow make it out to groups, at that point, do I just start going? I mean, do we have to get a third time for us to do it, or do we have to make the playoff stage? And then how much are you asking from one team to do so much lifting, where they're against like 4 LPL teams, 4 LCK teams, 4 LEC teams, 3 LCS teams, 2 VCS teams, 2 PCS teams? At what point does one team have to just carry a whole region on their back, which is what we don't want to have happen?
And like it's also like a reminder, of course, like DFM got to groups last year, but got drafted into a group with EDG, the eventual champions, T1, who looks damn good, and then 100 Thieves with the NA champions. That is a brutal group to get drawn into. I don't care who you are. That was always going to be a tough group to even get a win in to begin with. And it was tough.
There's a good chance we'd be in a similar group again, sadly.
Well, yeah, of course, and I think my statement would probably remain true, especially if, as often happens with play-ins, there's a meta shift between play-ins and groups. where certain teams don't know how to play certain things, or people have been scrimming differently, and things end up being a very short amount of time to find a learning curve against very good teams to find something that works. So like that is definitely a realistic possibility. I will say at least the LJL got bumped up from the pool 3 or whatever it is. Got bumped up a group, which I think was right, because that was really unbalancing groups.
I mean, Chiefs are third pool, even though they did just as everything that the LJL did, mostly. So I'm a bit confused because
they didn't get to
groups last year.
Yeah,
no, but they did good. They did better than MSI. But is it just because everyone bitch moaned and complained about the MSI format that they don't get to be a better pool?
I think Worlds weighs heavier than MSI on the whole.
Well, I mean, that's a whole other thing, right?
Which I think that should be the case. Anyway, this is like a huge other thing in terms of like pooly stuff.
I've got another.
Yeah, go on.
I've got another take that I've been seeing around. I thought I'd take us over to that tangent if you're okay with that.
Hell yeah.
DFM had a bad MSI.
Kind of.
Yeah, this is what I was going to bring up actually, because this is one which I saw. Effectively, there was a power ranking, which was obviously just clickbait, but I bit it. I bit down hard on that juicy apple of clickbait, because it said
He's on the line.
You know, they got a real like whipping at Worlds last year, and when they got like 0-6, and then their MSI was similarly disappointing. Like, what the fuck are you on? Like this, like, because this includes both portions of this, right? But specifically, we'll go into the MSI in a little bit more after that. But like with Worlds last year, because this is the point which I would say is that I saw a take that this is going to be the LJL's year, because last year was the LJL's year. And I think if you are not saying that, you are underselling what a huge accomplishment that was for the LJL as a region, where DFM finally made it to groups, and the LJL had been waiting for that for 8 years, and they had gotten close before. There were points where in like 2017 or so, they were winning Rift Rivals between them, what was Southeast Asia, kind of like the combined regions at that point, and then OCL. You were winning those tournaments, and they were getting through to the knockouts of playing stage only to lose like an EDG or a Cloud9, which were very strong at those tournaments. And 2018 when Cloud9 made semifinals, we faced them in like, I don't know, like playing groups, one of those tournaments or something like that. And I think that I'm sure there are some people that are saying this is like in terms of the meme way, in terms of like, this will be their year. Like, the problem is, again, this weighs more when you're talking about a region which people don't have that inherent knowledge of, and then can kind of like fill in the gaps of that is actually a joke with their own knowledge. Because DFM last year, they did something which for the LJL was unprecedented, and to do that by getting out first in their playing group
that's
as well,
the big deal.
Was crazy. And just getting to groups was the achievement. The fact that they were 0-6 is almost like nonsensical. It doesn't matter.
And also, look at that group. We mentioned,
but we're also forgetting history. They almost beat 100T. Like, they should be 1-5 in that group.
And they had a great early game. One of the games was the EDG as well, who were the
world
champions.
They also had a better pre-15 versus T1. Remember, Arya solo killed Faker and ran over mid lane for the first 15 minutes.
Yeah.
Now, after 15 minutes, it didn't go well. It went horribly. I don't want to talk about that, ladies and gentlemen. It was a travesty to watch, but they fucking did that shit, and history is just not retaining any of this.
Yeah, so if we were to make groups again, that is a huge thing. Now, I think that the goalposts are a little bit different, because I think that I think the goalposts are very different when you look at like a major region team or someone that comes from a major region. You think, oh yeah, quarterfinals, get in knockouts, get in semifinals. That's like a big result for a region. For the minor regions, just getting to groups is a huge thing. And as Sam brought up as well, like that, you have to take into account that group as well.
It's brutal. Like, that was always going to be a hard group to get a single win, whoever you were coming out of that playing group. I don't care what team you were, it was going to be tough. And to have the likes of, SKT, one of the most dominant teams of all time, the most famous team of all time, certain list. Yeah, exactly. You're looking at EDG, who were the champions, 100 Thieves, the NA first seed. That was always a brutal position to be put into. And you're looking at it again this year, and you look at this group and you go, well, the conditions are kind of not so dissimilar that they couldn't do it again, honestly. So I think it is.
Man, if we
people
get
go, this is the LJL's year, is ignoring last year, and then it's also like, it's like, yes, and they're just as good, and they're arguably better than they were last year in some ways. Well, they certainly feel more flexible in my mind than they were last year.
And then we've got to fill in the gaps with MSI as well, right?
Yeah.
Where people are saying they had a bad MSI result. It was disappointing in terms of the results. I'm not contesting that, but consider that the 1-5 is not realistically the same 1-5 as in another group, because they had two incredibly close games versus Saigon Buffalo. They went late game. They were really swinging punches back and forth. It was basically a coin flip between which one should have won. That was very close to being not a 1-5, but actually a 3 and like a 3-3 at that point, which would have basically seen them through on the head-to-head, and like that wouldn't have been unreasonable to see.
Yeah.
And their loss versus A's as well was after they were already eliminated, where you could kind of tell that the mental boom had started setting in. Do you think that is always a great excuse? No,
No.
but it is not the same as in a hyper-competitive, completely zeroed in. They lost when it meant it. They lost when it didn't actually mean anything, sadly. And yes, that's still a negative, but I'd like you to take that caveat into account as well.
Yeah.
They were better than this 1-5 suggested, and to say that it was a disappointing, poor tournament from them, I don't think that really explains the level that we're playing at.
No, and like again, it's something I bring up because again, people will look at the results and not at the details because it's easier in some ways. But again, you got to remember the average amount of gold DFM were up at 15 was something stupid like 3,000. Like they were smashing those games in the early game, and they would make one mistake in the mid game and they would kind of have the game turn around on them by the likes of Saigon Buffalo or whoever. Or it would be
and
like,
honestly, that was more credit to Saigon and T1 for just being able to paradigm switch that more than anything else. And that's why outside of that game against Team A's at the very end of it, the LLA representatives stood no chance against DFM when they were looking confident.
And they were even like up 7,000 gold in the game they lost to us and then threw it. Like it was like again, it was a problem we had.
We should have won.
But the fact is, like it wasn't like these games were like whitewashes against them. There were flaws, and you could see they came back into summer and worked on a lot of those flaws. We haven't seen as many of the foolish mid-late game mistakes as we once did. And part of that again is off things like Steel not being the only kind of go button that was a bit of a flaw at some of those points. You know, we'll have,
like I said, game 3 of the finals, of the upper bracket of the Juggernaut match. Game 3 of the Juggernaut match, I was like, you could see that DFM sometimes lack inspiration when there's no obvious engage/win condition. Sometimes, and that'll be on their drafting to stop that being pigeonholed into that, and then also just like relying a little bit more Steel and Harp rather than just Steel to really launch those kind of initiations.
Yeah, and like I remember that point in the game, and even then I'm not as convinced as Alex is about this, but like I remember him having this conversation with me at the time actually, and I'm still less convinced it was as big a deal as it was, partly because Yarong was it was kind of like Yarong was doing a lot of crazy stuff on the Zoe as well, which was a very good game from him. And even in that game, it's like there's a certain element of like how much of this was the old floor of DFM rearing its head and how much of this was just like trying to find the pick that earns them the Baron to win the game, because they were getting stalled out around vision control on the red side quadrant of the enemy jungle quite a lot. And you know, they like all of these things, like it's like even then you could see the flaws being worked on. I'll be curious to see how they do, having made those learnings over the year.
It's just like you have to just look at the scoreboards. Like DFM in like one of those two games against Saigon Buffalo, they just had more kills and they were consistently ahead in that game, except until Saigon Buffalo was smarter and they would figure out a way to actually end the game. Like there's just so much lost. Like it was not a disappointing performance from DFM. Yeah, sure, losing sucks. Like no one's gonna say otherwise to that.
It's a disappointing scoreline, not necessarily a disappointing level of play. I think I think Worlds last year, I think actually DFM, you know, they did the region proud, incredible result. Do not view it as anything other than that. And then MSI, seriously, just watch the games. Like if you're saying that they were like shit during MSI, I don't think you realistically watch the games in the same way that we did.
And losing a best of one of the two BO1s against T1 in the fashion that Lei lost in 23 minutes in their second round robin. How many other teams, seriously, do you think can really stand up against T1 in that form at MSI? Really, ladies and gentlemen out there. Thank you. The silence was echoing deafening because not many teams could. There we go. Crazy story. Also, I'm excited for T1 and Faker, honestly, coming into this Worlds, lads. I really want it. I've honestly put T1 as my team winning, but I might change it to G&G.
So, funny thing, I think that with the meta changing towards more scaling mid laners and being able to stay in lane a little bit more, I think that Gen G could be the winner, actually.
I think it's good for Chovy.
Yeah, I think things are, I think realistically it's going to be between Genji and top. I think
Probably.
before the patch changes, I would have said top quite confidently. I think now that Genji are like, they're still dark horse, but for me, like, just keep your eyes on them.
Yeah, and I'll throw in for like I agree with that, and I think the smart money's on Genji and top. I'll say I also put T1 in because I think the favorites rarely actually win worlds. It's always someone not the favorite.
God, true.
Yeah, like very rarely unless it's SKT being
For
insanely
one
dominant back in
time,
the
no
day.
one thinks Faker
Yeah.
can do it. This is when he'll do it.
But I'm just saying the meta has actually shifted relatively heavily from playoffs. Like Zeri is gone. You're not really waiting in the same way you used to be for 3-4 items on any character. It's more like 2 on things like even like Kalista, Draven, Caitlyn, Aphelios, or
We're
your
going to see
picks right
so
now in
many
bot lane.
misfortunes. It's going to be
Yeah,
so
misfortunes as
tilting.
well. Exactly. And I'm looking at those and going, that feels more like Guma Yushi's champion pool than what we saw in summer. And I'm like, I'm not sure how, like, the Lucian is great for Ruler, and I'm sure that's really happy. I'm really happy to see him on that. But some of those other picks are less him outside of the Kalista. And that might hurt.
We'll see.
I'm
gonna
so, like,
take
there's
you
a
away.
world where the
Yeah.
T1 one's not as
Okay.
crazy as people think it is.
Okay, do we have any more like spicy stuff that we'd like to address heading into this?
Um,
Because I can think of a couple of things. Because one thing
Okay.
is, this is a great one. This is a great one.
Alright.
DFM are not actually an LGL team.
Oh,
No, this is for me. This is for me. This is my spicy take and what I think people will get wrong. What I think people will get wrong is comparing DFM to saying that DFM plays like the LGL.
they don't.
Saying that DFM, this is what you get from the LGL. This is what we know the LGL for. No, this is what you know what DFM is for. So this is the kind of problem where, like, coming into MSI this year, people were saying, like, DFM are an awesome early game team. They are, but the region sucks at early game. Take that into account. DFM, like, they're so good about playing around XYZ. Yes, that is true, but you just have to temper a lot of these things with how they play around the region. What's really interesting to me is actually how they play out even in late games when against other teams which are very proficient in that, and particularly when they're playing around very strong bot lanes, and they manage to crush these very strong bot lanes either by hammering them, which is what they did in spring to like Sol and Secret. Actually, we saw that. Actually, oh no, yeah, it was against Vital actually sometimes as well, where you could see that
The Lucian Army, the last game of finals.
Yeah, exactly,
Holy
stuff
moly.
like that. That's crazy. Or you just play away from it. Like that's the stuff which is really important to me. I don't think you actually learn much about the LGL outside of DFM by watching DFM.
Yes, I will also say that DFM proved they could play early game at MSI. That was the thing they
Yes.
were actually really good at internationally. It was they failed to convert as smoothly as they would like to closing out games around like the tier 2s and breaking into the bases we'd have liked. That was the problems we had. But the early game was not a flaw. And you look at the LJ as a whole, we're not exactly a slow region, but we're certainly not a fast one. We are there's a lot of mid-game objective fights, which are really where the region shines. DFM were the region DFM were the team rather, that were the fastest team by a long margin. They were 4 minutes faster than the next fastest team, who were V3, and they were the fastest because they were losing. DFM kind of were a bit of an outlier. Were the outlier because they did play early game so aggressively and were getting such exorbitantly big leads at 15. And the fact they can show some of that at an international level that we saw earlier in the year is great news, but it's not an LJL staple.
Can I make that a bingo card, like slot points, Alex? Like this is an LJL team. It's like they said it.
DFM are not actually. They don't actually play like an LGL team. They're the only team with like the communication skills to play wide map competitions as well, where they're playing with globals. They're playing around side lanes. This is something that this came up when Axis were doing really well with Nemo's Thresh, and it was Kazu, coach of DFM, who was like, "Why are people letting him play this? Is super OP in the LGL." Because most LGL teams have to play engage 5v5 comps because they don't have the communication skills because they're playing on multiple language rosters to play wide map things in terms of how do you communicate resets, how do you communicate your vision control, how do you communicate cooldowns across the map, whatever. And it's like, and the reason why Thresh is really good at that is because he counters comps which just jump into you, especially during last summer. It was a really interesting conversation about how DFM could play this wider map style because everyone spoke Japanese or everyone spoke Korean. They could stick to one language really, really well. And that's not something the rest of the LGL does either.
No, honestly, DFM are the only team. I mean, Sengoku, that was one of the big praises of, honestly, their roster, because they could just all immediately speak the same language together, because NT speaks multiple languages, Paz speaks multiple languages. They have that ability to just switch into Korean. I believe Sengoku were playing full Korean for a period of time.
Were they?
Yeah,
When
when
had
Vital was in.
yeah.
When Vital was in the West, yeah.
When Honey was playing, they were playing in full Japanese, but when they switched back to Vital, it was all Korean, because Paz and NT both speak Korean.
So, yeah.
So
I know, like, for DFM, they speak Japanese, because Yaharong's a big weeb, apparently, and speaks good Japanese.
They're both fluent. They're actually both. This is a big thing about DFM. They actually picked up when they've picked up players, they picked up players who have been like actually fluent in Japanese, which is really good for them.
Yeah, and also players with connections as well. Remember, last time they were over, they had players that were assisting with planes and scrimming and stuff. That was a big thing that Aria brought to the team, remember, last time? Yaharong and Harper are believed to be doing the exact same. And also, remember, DFM also legitimized themselves as actual scrim partners, because guess what, ladies and gentlemen? They take scrims really fucking seriously, they do, as a team.
That's actually the reason. That's the reason why they're on top of the region, because they can actually improve while they're still at the top, because they take their practice really, really seriously.
Yeah.
That's that's how they manage to stay ahead for so long.
Let me throw a quick story out here as well. Is that, like, this is around scrim results in general. There was something going around about, like, this was the UMaster specifically, where everyone was really rating certain French teams because they were smashing people in scrims. And then Jack Spectra came out and said, "Look, we did not play Draven in scrims. Just don't bother. There's no point. We know we win with it. He said we don't want to practice it. It's pointless. We'll pick that if it's open, but we don't want to scrim with it because we're too good at it. So we want to play other stuff to get good at it or to learn new stuff. And so our scrim win rate isn't as good as it could have been, because we're not playing the things that allow us to win. We're playing the stuff that allows us to get better." And I think that's something very true of a team like DFM as well. It's like they just gotten very good at getting things out of scrims, because they get to scrim with the teams like GAM from the VCS. They've opened some doors to get some scrims against LPL, LCK, their academy squads as well, and proven they are worth scrimming against, and they get a lot out of them. And you kind of saw it with how flexible they've become as a team in terms of what they play and how they play, and that's pretty great to see. And it's the reason I'm always nervous about scrim win rates, because winning scrims is irrelevant in my mind. How much you're learning from scrims is actually what's important.
Well, this is why they were losing against like ERL scrim partners in around MSI 2021, and they were just like, "So we're learning about macro." They literally played 10 scrim games a day for like 8 days solid. I'm just like, okay, cool. We're just gonna go macro. We don't need to play solo queue. This is what we need to know. And then of course they got that one over Cloud9. Took a very close game versus Damwon as well, although they lost that. But yeah, I think the mentality of that shows through.
Yeah, and DFM mental game has definitely improved as this team gets to keep playing together. That's just something that Kazu and honestly the whole staff in general and TM and players, they just got a good mental game and they go to resets. And also Ebby is so good at resetting a team with a speech, apparently. That is one of his like special talents. And are we surprised? Are we really that surprised when that man will come on if all the chips are down? I want that man giving me a thumbs up going, "Now we got this." I'll be like, "All right, yeah, I believe you. I believe you." I'd like to throw out a hot take, if I may, gentlemen.
Go for it.
I've been hearing murmurings that just because the world meta was mostly focused around AD carries, that doesn't really give much credit to the idea that the LJL is a heavy bot lane meta centric region, which in turn won't really give DFM much of an edge when it comes to international stage.
I wanted to take this point slightly.
I'm sorry, Sam. I'm sorry.
No, because I actually had a slightly different angle in the sense that I sometimes think that for good reason, Ebby is often the hero of the broadcast build, because he's been going for a very long time. He's very iconic. The thumbs up on camera is such a wonderful thing. And he plays such an entertaining style on the stage with things like the ergot and the rest of it.
Well, his set, remember.
Exactly. And that's great. But I sometimes think people then default to assuming DFM will just de facto play around Ebby. And that's just not going to be true unless that's the meta that they need to do. Because actually, I would argue that with the way the world's at and the way the meta's at, they might well be looking around Utapon. And you should be excited about that, because Utapon and Heart are pretty cracked. And they've been training against some pretty damn good bot lanes, because the LJL has got its weaknesses and roles, but it doesn't have that in bot lane, really. Our AD carries and supports are pretty damn good.
Imagine us bringing that up earlier in the podcast around the LJL playoffs thing to give a wider picture of the LJL and what they are practiced against.
Because, like, I think 6 to 7 of our teams had genuinely good to great AD carries. Like but outside of like V3 was struggling and Yuhi wasn't phenomenal.
Yuhi's
Let's be real.
Yuhi.
But
Yeah.
the other 6 were genuinely pretty damn good. Sangchu, despite being on a team that was struggling, was good. We've talked about Hybrid. Great.
Awesome.
Sol, phenomenal. We've talked about Vital and Honey, 2 of the best on the same damn team. You've got Unipon. Like, you can go through. The Hawks had Marble, who really glowed up throughout the season as well. Was this rookie
Honestly,
superstar.
Japanese player to maybe think about
Yeah.
for the future, ladies and gentlemen. If you don't
Like,
know
he's
anything about the
very good.
LJL, Marble might be a common
Marble-
name you'll know.
One day.
Marble's got talent. And you're like, and you look at this and you go, okay, well, congratulations. 6 out, like 3/4 of the region has like a.
That was 7 AD carries you named as well.
Yeah, exactly. 7 out of 9 AD carries are genuinely very good. And then you think, okay, they're training against these kind of players all the time, and Udipon's still coming out on top pretty much every time. Like his numbers are nuts, along with the rest of DFM for obvious reasons. But even so, he has really, really smashed it. And I think coming into a group where, for various reasons, the bot laners aren't at the level you'd hope because of either illness, because poor old Upset and Hillisang have been caught with COVID, and so may well not be starting. You're looking at Kaori is replacing Danny for mental health reasons. Like there's lots of reasons to go and say, yeah, Udipon could well be the best AD carry in this group potentially. I mean, that's not an easy sell because Wako and Rays from the Chiefs and
Udipon's the best.
and Beyond
I'm
Gaming.
all in on this.
And then of course you've got Brancer from Loud is phenomenal as well. But like this group full of very good AD carries, Udipon is right up there with them. And I hope the broadcast don't sleep on him because he's very good.
Yeah, for me, Udipon's my player to watch for DFM this tournament. I think that in terms of okay, so this is like, I guess we're kind of moving on to different stuff in terms of what because this will lead into matchup-y stuff after. But I think the real key for me is how Steel and Harp do to make sure that the carries which can carry the game actually have a solid platform to work off of.
Yeah.
So I think in this game, when you're looking at, like in this group, and you've got like Inspired and Razork hanging around, Chiefs who love to skirmish quite a lot early as well. Well, they can kind of do both. They actually they played a lot of smashing, like smash out 15-minute like crazy victory kind of stuff. Like they get early game leads. But you need Harp and Steel to be on the same page to allow someone like Utapon to actually show what they're made of and not just be in like a 3v2 because they are going to be junglers just permanently bot lane or something. But yeah, I feel like Utapon and Harp have so much experience now against actually very good AD carries, and that's very good AD carries on like beyond a minor region standard. Do I think they're not going to be LCK or LPL standard because their bot lane is absolutely cracked. But like there are some people who are like, yeah, but I think a lot of these bot lanes could slot into an LEC or an LCS. I don't think that they're going to be outside of that. And guess what? They don't have any LCK or LPL bot lanes in their group A. So if you get Utapon and Harp able to take control of laning phase, being able to play some pressure lanes, Lucian Nami, I'm not sure whether they'll be around. Zeri's kind of dead as a champion as well, so there are some of our more meta ones going away. But like, yeah, I think I do agree with Sam. I think that Yutpon and Harp have the right tools to deal with what's happening there. I think the meta shifting towards more scaling, I don't actually know how that's going to affect DFM. I haven't thought that through.
Well, it's like
They were great in
which bits of
previous
scaling.
ones. We'll be fine. We'll be
'Cause-
fine, lads. Don't worry. I want to kind of just move us on.
Yes.
Just keep us moving, lads.
Go for it.
Have we got any other hot takes or things
I
we've
think those
heard
are
about
most of them.
DFM? Or have we hit most of the
So we've
points,
done the
gents?
one team region. We've done stuff about like how stats lie about them because they're not actually, they don't play like the LJL as a region just doesn't fit what they do.
Yeah.
MSI and past
MSI,
world
yeah.
Don't think the teams just play toward Abbey. They do a lot more than that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's most of it.
I think we've hit the main core points, which we've now dismantled and told you, no, there is an element of truth, as in all these things, but that element is flimsy at best. Gentlemen, do you have any other takes you'd like to mention, or am I good to move us on to our matchup?
Take us on.
All right. Well, we're going to bring back to this cam because I mean it's just better for it. Gentlemen, we're going to talk a bit more about our predictions, and not only predictions but also expectations, what to expect. We don't have to go super in depth in all of this. And honestly, along with this, I'm going to try and find. Actually, I don't have this at hand, so I'm just going to say it offhand. I believe for myself, I had EG. No. DFM number 1, obviously.
Good man.
EG, and then I've got Fnatic Chiefs currently. But now it probably won't be Fnatic. Fnatic are now a 5th team for me. So I've got now Beyond and Chiefs making it, and Fnatic and Loud are going to be the 2 teams that I don't think will make it in.
So I'll throw this in here because I will stand by Fnatic coming out first because I actually think Bean and Rux are really good. They're the guys who will be stepping in. Bean and Rux are
I'm
very
worried for
good.
their jungle support synergy. That's what I'm worried about.
Yeah, maybe there's some truth to that, but Rux is very good and Razork's very good.
Agreed.
I will say I am a little bit nervous, but obviously, like at least they're switching out the whole bot lane because the synergy there is good. Bean and Rux have been playing in the ERLs for a very long
Is
time.
it confirmed
Very
that they're
good.
playing first game? Or?
They are if Upset and Hillisang will go out. I've not heard
But
any
they've
updates.
not
So I
been
think
confirmed
they
that
are.
they're playing first game. So we're playing them on
so-
second game. So.
So if it's Upset and Hillisang, great news. If not, it'll be okay. We'll see. I think more nervously is the fact that the Fnatic's PCs that they've been given by Riot have been really struggling. They're struggling to get
Apparently
30
that's a
FPS.
commonplace thing for practice.
Not
But
for
anyway,
DFM
it's
though,
not
because they've
great.
been playing practice and grinding like no tomorrow. So we're good, boys.
So,
we're good.
but I still think
But it
Fnatic
feels bad.
should come out on top. I'm going to stick with it. It might well fall apart, but the ERL lover in me says, "Yo, ERL bot lane, they're going to crack it."
All right, so Fnatic first for you.
DFM second. I then went Beyond. I went Evil Geniuses because I think this is a rough time to bring in a sub bot laner, which is ironic because I'm putting
Full bot lane.
yes, but at least Beans had Worlds experience last year, and he did pretty good.
Mate, he'll be the only player to play 2 worlds without any major region experience.
Exactly, poor guy. Yeah, exactly.
Crack.
The guy, get him a slot. Then I think it's
Loud and Chiefs in some order.
Chiefs and Loud. I think probably, but Loud are pretty good, so we'll see. I think that's a very hard group to call Group A.
Agreed. Nymaera, you haven't been on a single show where you've talked about your predictions to my knowledge coming into this
I've actually not been on any shows about LJL yet.
Which honestly is a bit of a... But, I mean...
crazy.
We won't talk about... Anyway, what's your predictions, sir? Can I get your predictions? And I imagine you'll be posting these on Twitter prior to the first game.
Probably. I think that we are going to see... I think
first?
DFM is second, but I don't know whether they're second to Fnatic or EG, and the other one's going to be third.
Okay.
Now, the thing for me is I'm trying to compare Fnatic and how they lost to Rogue to what could happen with DFM, showing some similarities, actually, in terms of, like, they have very high value carries if they're allowed to function, and can DFM just stave off Razork just being nuts if he's on the same form as playoffs to get them to that point? I am worried about Humanoid.
1.
It is. It's a best of 1. I am worried about Humanoid, though, because if Humanoid is on stuff... Because Humanoid's Victor is also terrifying. His mages have always been incredibly good as well.
Silas is playable.
In the first round of the best of 1 versus Faker, he was okay. So
Yaharong had a terrible tournament, MSI. That's one thing which I do...
No, I'm just talking about one game he had an okay 15 minutes versus Faker, then I don't want to...
But like he was caught out in side lanes and he disconnected from the team. I do think that won't be a case here at Worlds. I don't think that'll be the case at Worlds. I think Yaharong has been... I think that... Actually, that's the reason why I think DFM are really above a team even like Loud, for instance, because they got Tinowns, who's the real engine of that team in a lot of ways, where Tinowns is just like such a veteran player for that team and brings a lot of the strength to them. I think Yaharong does a lot of what Tinowns does, but better in terms of like, he has great laning, he has great ability to impact the map as well. I think that Humanoid is just very, very good though. And
yes,
I feel like it is...
There's a reason they were third seed.
I'm still going to say it's Fnatic. I'm going to say Fnatic, DFM, EG, although I'm worried about the Inspired factor. I think Inspired and Razork are going to be the 2 big hurdles that DFM need to overcome. I think that EG's support, jungle support is potentially best in group.
Yeah,
and that would be difficult.
That's fair.
But I think that still having a sub ADC, I don't know, but then you can say that same about Fnatic. Okay, I'm going to stick to it. I think it's Fnatic, DFM, EG, just based off of vibes at this point. And then I think the thing about Beyond and the thing about the PCS is that they've struggled to really find a successor mid-jungle to River Maple, who were just incredible on PSG. I think that
they had good, exciting rookies until one of them decided to int his whole fucking career.
Oh, man. I mean, but even then, I don't think that was a mid-jungle which was like international beating.
No,
I think
that's
they were
fair.
fine, but I don't think they were international beating. I think that's the same with BYG. I think that their mid-jungle it's fine, good even, but not like excellent. I think that their bot lane is the part which is truly excellent. And you don't even have someone like Hanabi there, right, to really counter Ebby in terms of what Ebby can do in an individual matchup. So I think that BYG against DFM, they probably lose.
I mean, everyone just talks about Wacko for that team, which I don't think is a
the top
good
lane is
place to
apparently
be.
very good as well, from what I was hearing from Nightstar and Pyro. The
That's
top lane is
true.
actually apparently very, very good. So
But is he Hanabi is the thing for me.
Well,
like,
they were talking about him in
Okay.
similar terms.
Oh,
so
sure.
I get-
Okay. Maybe. Okay. I haven't done. I haven't
Who
really
and a
looked
lot
at
of
him so
people
much
like
then.
Husha. I mean,
Yeah,
Yeah, I think it's
so
I think it's Fnatic, DFM, EG. I will.
I'm.
Bottom three is actually really hard to predict.
know.
This whole group is really hard to predict. I'm
You could
going to
honestly
go
flip a few coins or roll
because
some dice, and you'd
I
be
think
just
that
as
Chiefs
right.
could go third to anywhere between third and last actually as well, depending on the rest of the teams. I think it's probably going to be BYG Chiefs Loud. I think that Loud. They have their strengths. I think that sadly they match up against strengths of other teams too strongly. And when you've got like Humanoid, Jojo, Yaharong in your group, T9s is going to have a rough time. I think that against BYG, that's okay. But then you also have to deal with the bot lane. And I'm like, that's not necessarily where the same strengths. Same strengths lie. Chiefs. Oh, they're such a wild card, man. That they could be anywhere. I'm going to stick with that, though. I'm going to stick with that. Fnatic, DFM, EG, Beyond, Chiefs, Loud.
Okay.
But this could go anywhere. We
Well,
could
the most
potentially even
important-
see Fnatic and EG both dropping out of top two. We could legitimately see that.
I mean, there's also the best timeline, in my opinion, and this is obviously because I'm not on LEC or LCS, unlike you two lovely gentlemen, sir. The best timeline to me is all minor regions are top four, and it's just the two major region teams just completely run it down.
Collapse out. Oh boy.
And it's just like, wait, Loud, Chiefs, BYG, DFM, first, second, third, fourth? What is going on? Like, an absolute thing. And then, I mean, then the playing format looks absolutely cracked. So, I mean, hey, I mean, I can't decide this one. Group B, I don't think there's much sense talking about it. There's this general consensus that DRX, RNG first, second, and then it's probably Saigon, Buffalo, and Mad are probably.
Well, I think a lot of
fourth.
people are saying like Mad might be third. I think that Mad could even drop out.
I think so.
I think they might.
I think
even
Idris
drop out
could make it through.
There's even a chance that they lose to Isris or Istanbul One Cup Wildcats.
Yeah,
if they don't
agreed.
really sort out their stuff, because particularly it's going even more scaling, which is not what Mad have done.
Nope.
Mad have done this thing where they basically get Niski on a champion to be second jungler and cover what Elioya should be doing as a meta jungle in terms of like having presence around side lanes, making sure that they're kind of covered when they're pushing in and something like that. Niski will actually be the one in range with a teleport, a Talia wall, while Elioya is taking camps. And then what happens is Elioya becomes a carry from the jungle, even on champions which are not hard carries, stuff like Trundle. So he can be a stronger frontline, and a frontline diff can be incredibly powerful in something like Trundle or Poppy, and then just becomes another damage threat as well. So I think that's what they were successful on, and I think that is harder to pull off with the mid lane champion pool that's happening right now, because they don't get to perform that role which Niski does, and even if you are playing the same champions, they do it less well.
I'll throw it out that at least the bot lane is shifting away from the same amount of scaling. You're not really looking at 4-item AD carries, you're looking at 2-3 item AD carries, because Draven, Kalista, Caitlyn, Aphelios, kind of, and Miss Fortune, all the current AD carries, and they are spiking earlier than Zeri Sivir, which are more 4
At least they have an
items.
Aatrox player.
Yeah, and Armut's a big Aatrox player, which is good news. The other picks less comfortable for Armut, I suspect, but that's a good one for him. I think Nar's probably still doable, so he'll be okay. Probably, yeah, but you might be able to pinch him out. We'll see. I think he'll struggle against Breathe. Breathe will take his head off. But I think Breathe will take everybody's head off in that group.
Yes.
But I think for all that it's going to hurt Niski, I think it does actually play into Unforgiven, because Unforgiven is a big Draven player. He does like things like the
Draven should be banned against him every game.
I
think Draven should be banned against him every game, and I don't think you need to care about his Kalista, because Mad are not very good at Kalista.
No.
As a team, I think that they played like one good game of Kalista versus Rogue, and then one awful game of Kalista versus Rogue.
This is where I do think like a minor region team like Istanbul Wildcats, who are driven by a player like Holy Phoenix, right, from the AD carry role, that suddenly you guys go, all right, lads, 5v5 team fight, and Mad Lions just go, we're not ready quite yet, and then and Holy Phoenix is like, now, and then the team just go, okay, and that was one thing that I have heard about this team. When they go now, normally for better, because they are the first seed of their region, occasionally for worse, but I mean that could really play into something here, and I can see where you're coming from, and it will be interesting to see if Mad Lions come in volatile or fine.
I mean, as much as I've cast them a lot this year, and I've got a lot of love for Mad and their players, because they're great guys, and the org is a really nice org as well. Like, I really want to see Saigon Buffalo make it out, man. It
Yeah.
just like
I do.
we've spent so like I want what we had for the LJL last year to happen to these other minor
Yeah.
regions, and particularly VCS. Like VCS, like as much as we haven't covered that region, we're close with the folks that end up like they broadcast that as well, and I really enjoy their play styles. I would love to see Saigon Buffalo and Garm do well. They really deserve it for the region.
I think there's a real chance where DFM comes second, Saigon Buffalo come third, and we end up with a best of 5 to get out of play-ins between DFM.
If it be
and
that,
Saigon
I'm okay
Buffalo,
with that.
which I think would be very exciting, and I think that's a real possibility. I do think Mad end up 4th on paper. Again, I think all of us had issues with how Mad were playing in playoffs, and the fact that they were really struggling with where the meta was going, and just in general they didn't look as crisp as they did just weeks earlier. Of course, there's been time to change things. Been chance to grow as a team. They're good players, and they've got great coaching staff. So we'll see what they've done. But at least on paper and from what we've seen, I think all of us favour Saigon Buffalo over them.
Now, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to put it out there. If anybody over in our live Twitch chat or over in our Discord server that is maybe sinking into this, I've heard, ask us questions. We're probably going to talk for the next few minutes about another topic, but then we will come back and see your questions. Gentlemen, with Worlds obviously being in North America for the first time in a hot minute, it's great to see, obviously, but there has been issues around a lot of stuff for this World. I mean, obviously, a lot of NA fans obviously were expecting a player like a team like Team Liquid to actually make it to Worlds, and then that didn't happen. Are there any teams that you're kind of surprised didn't make it to this Worlds? Obviously TL is a very big obvious one, but are there any other teams that you were hopeful maybe
V5.
might see it?
V5.
That's a good one. I was hopeful for LNG as well.
That's fair. LNG had a really good run, but V5,
oh my god,
how's Rookie not at Worlds again?
Yeah. That's the thing with LPL. There's always just a team which just what do you want? There's always so many teams which are in participation. I am kind of sad that Mad and Fnatic made it through. Well, Fnatic, they deserved to have their playoffs run, but I think I would have liked to see Misfits if they got their crap together. Misfits would have been fun. Actually, I mean, XL would have been a different team to send. I think Misfits I would have liked to see.
If XL made it, Fnatic couldn't have made it, right? So it's that weird trade-off one.
Part of me is lol, SK, just so I could make my bet. I need to still sort that out.
Oh, you gotta get some. For the reference, Alex needs to get some Star Guardian.
I mean, I still. I mean, actually, that's the whole issue, right? Because Mad were always going to basically make it through. But Misfits didn't. I wish, honestly, Mad and Misfits could have played a BO5.
Well, we'll just bring back the Gauntlet.
I mean, that would just make more sense, but
just make the Gauntlet. I mean, it has logistical problems where in terms of you need to open up the studio on way more amount of days, so logistically there's a lot of extra costs. And you got to play a lot more extra days for everyone working on the show and whatever. So, but I think that if this is the way that the format is going to stay, especially if we aren't going to get an LCL seed back for next year, I think LEC needs to change its playoffs. I think it needs to add something in there. The other problem is there's a good chance then that then overlaps with E-Masters. And that is a problem if you have a road show to bring everything out of LEC Studio in terms of tech to then put it back in for a regional qualifier or whatever. There's a whole lot of logistical things, even though I think that it would be better for the whole format and the whole region.
One other quick topic, gentlemen, I'd like to bring up because I keep hearing it anywhere, and it feels like this is maybe a more perfect way to end our conversation around play-ins. Because the next one we might have, the next podcast we might have, might be the end of playoffs or halfway through playoffs. We're not play-ins rather. We're not quite sure. We'll see if how DFM are doing. If they're already out,
please do well.
We might do a podcast then just to kind of sing them out, and then that'll be it. But we'll see. Hopefully they make it out first seed, and it's fine. It's about the format, gentlemen. Because a lot of people for this play-ins format are starting to talk about how there needs to be a wildcard invitational again. The system does not work. It's faulted. And I mean, half of the issue with that is because they brought in LCK and LPL 4th seeds into the play-in stage. Like, that was part of the issue, and now it's becoming exacerbated, and people are looking at this play-ins and going, this is really competitive. Now, obviously on Twitter, I've already made the base comment that we've already had this, and Unicorns of Love made it out in 2020, and DFM made it out in 2021. So the argument is kind of already false. But that's beside the point, because arguably you've got RNG and DRX. You've got the MSI champions and stuff, and like it's starting to feel like it's becoming very competitive. I actually don't mind this format. I just wish it was fleshed out more. I wish it had more time to breathe as an actual event for as part of Worlds, as opposed to being squashed into under a week.
Yes, I think that's fair. I think I actually quite like the play-ins format in some ways. I think what probably you at least get more best of fives this way, right? You like if you are second, third, fourth, you're getting a best of five. First, if you've done one of the best ones, you get to buy them. Only the last place team is immediately knocked out, so you at least get.
But it's last two teams now.
Is it? No, it's not.
Yes.
It is. You're right. It is. Yes, you're right.
Yeah.
It is, isn't it?
So
that's
that was
why.
the way that's why it's different.
You're right. It
Because
is.
obviously, remember we lost seeds in the previous ones, which meant that teams were automatically bumped up, and then we're still
Correct.
effectively you had like
that's right.
I think it was like they were gonna have LCK third and fourth in play-ins last year, and then one of them got bumped up to allow for
That's
whatever.
correct.
So we cut a team away for this. So
That's
it used to be
what it
5 teams per
was.
group, now it's 6.
And VCS couldn't make it, so we had 10 teams, right?
Okay, no, I'm with you. Yeah, so like, okay, so that changed my mind a little bit. But even so, I think the play-ins format itself is not a bad one. I do think there should potentially be a tournament beforehand to get into the play-ins portion. I want a wildcard into the play-ins. In fact, honestly, I would like to have a little bit more open qualification in some ways. I'd like other teams to have a chance to get in here. I want an international element, the like TI element, where you can have other teams try and get in through a kind of more open tournament that maybe not all of it's broadcast necessarily, or at least not Riot broadcast, but at least you have some ways to get in, because then you could have teams like Heretics or Carmine Core, who've done very well at EMAS, giving it a go. Someone from the collegiate scene in NA giving it a go. Yeah, like that could be quite exciting way to get additional teams in. And I think
it would also give like really unknown regions, like over in India and Arab region, like an actual opportunity. If they win random tournament that none of us ever hear about, and then they get to come over to an event and play in something that. They might get
on top of that. That'd be cool.
Realistically, that's never going to happen.
No, it's never.
I know. I'm aware.
And it works against Riot's whole like ecosystem for
which they made, which forces less regions to participate.
I mean, there are other sports which have found models which work for them, even with this kind of thing. Say, for instance, rugby union is probably an example of this. I think there are still big issues with it, but then you have
even then rugby union has different tiers, right? You can still go up and down the leagues,
but you're rarely ever going to have a team in Europe being able to make it up Six Nations. You're rarely going to have a lot of like smaller nations being able to qualify through. It's not a direct comparison. I do think that there does need to be some effort in bringing
is there really?
Yeah, because I mean, there is no like a MENA server, right? That would. Oh, is there one? I don't think there is one.
There
right?
is, I think.
Okay, well, anyway, but like, there's no competitive like world qualifying for that. Neither like India, Pakistan, like that kind of area of the world as well. There are multiple areas where like they're not currently even. There's no way to qualify the worlds from your region of the world, which I think is a bit of work.
And also part of the issue there is also that the player base is playing Wild Rift. They're not always playing League of Legends, so you got
well, that's because Wild Rift is more open as well. You can actually get in that way as well. There are issues there, and even if you look at say something like rugby, which does have a bit more closed system with international tournaments, still can have any team qualify to the World Cup. Like that's still doable, even if you don't have a bigger space. You can still make your ways into the World Cup. You don't have to be in tournaments and that kind of thing.
I think this harkens back to a point that Alex raised several podcast episodes ago, and then briefly retalked about it here. Obviously, that would just be nice to have more international events in general, because more international events equals more teams, which means more players, which just means more faces, more stories, more opportunities to actually have their stories told.
None of this trickle down economics of League of Legends, where it's like you get the experience because these other teams have gone to Worlds. It's like no, it doesn't actually work like that.
I mean, there was a very good comment. There was a very good comment, but like question brought up by Tom Mattison at the one of the press conferences last year at Worlds, where he basically called out the number of best of fives we've had between NA and EU over the last 5 years.
That's like a good point.
It's been like 3, if that. how is that being the case? How come we don't have like some of these big rivalries and the fact that we don't get to see these big best of fives between the best teams in regions where there is a lot of narrative and pride at stake? And that's problematic, bluntly. There should be more ways to make that happen. And if that is things like a loser's bracket or at least making it double elimination to an extent for some of these runs, which I'm massively in favor of, and Riot certainly seems to be trying to push towards in things like Valorant, which, I think they do it in Wild Rift as well, if I remember correctly. It really is just League of Legends that's with the single elimination format right now. And I have my issues with that. And I do think there needs to be space in an international calendar to put aside things like these best of fives between regions that does allow for more matchups with stakes at things like Worlds. And that is a problem right now with the format.
That was the beautiful thing of Rift Rivals, and people denounced it, and now it's gone. How much more do we want it back? It's kind of crazy.
I think that Rift Rivals for major regions doesn't make sense. The teams don't want to do it. It doesn't really give them that much. I think for minor regions,
it's not for the regions. It's for us, the fans.
But like doing it like mid-split, it's not good for the welfare players.
No, yeah, that's fair.
It doesn't give them anything. I think for minor regions, it could work because it can help alleviate some of the seeding concern. I mean, I had a whole conversation about this.
Seeding
a while ago.
Yes.
I had it on Twitter as well, in terms of like, I feel like you can fix some seeding concerns. It can give some international exposure to these teams in a competitive setting where they wouldn't get it otherwise, and then it stops this gatekeeper, this lock and key of, if you have a team which is dominant in your region, you are not going to get that like practice spread to the rest of the region, which is obviously one of the big problems of DFM not actually ever losing. Now, it's good for them, obviously, and it does mean I think that this is the best way for the LJL to get the best result possible. I do think that is the case. I wouldn't send another team but DFM to get the highest possible result. No. But in terms of long-term longevity, in terms of the health of the region, it ain't helping, because the rest of the region just has to like pull themselves up by the bootstraps, which is, of course, the analogy of that it doesn't work. You don't have the actual facilities to pull yourself up.
Especially
on that like depressing bombshell.
No. I want to go to that to the nth degree now, because I mean, with how LJL performed at the most international event that we had, 4 LJL Academy representatives, it was not good to be an LJL fan.
She was back and
didn't help.
Did not do much. I mean, taking a year off for that guy did not do wonders for him. Bless him. He, the Asia Cup did not do well. And as an LJL fan and supporter,
EDGY though, holy moly!
I mean, there's some good rookie talent in LCK and LPL coming up through. That's exciting. Cocoon is still good. That's the only big takeaway I can take from that, ladies and gentlemen. It's like the guy who was already playing main stage playoffs, who was actually beating LJL mids occasionally, might be a good mid rookie. Crazy idea, that. But with that bombshell, that's going to be the podcast, gentlemen. I'm going to come over to you first, Nymaera.
Hello.
What are you going to be doing over this next 2 weeks? I don't know. Play-ins is coming up, right?
Probably trying to educate people on DFM when they inevitably don't know anything about them on social media and more. I'll be around. I'll be watching play-ins when I can. Obviously, the time zone is pretty awful for it. Besides that, I don't know. I might stream a bit. We'll see. I'll be playing guitar and figuring out how to swing a lightsaber. Turns out it's more difficult than it looks. That's kind of it, really. Go follow me on my various socials, and you'll find out there, maybe.
Very good. Initialise. So, what are you going to be doing over these next few weeks?
Being jealous that Alex has a lightsaber, mostly. I want that lightsaber. It's so cool. No, I'd probably be watching a lot of Worlds for obvious reasons. Trying to get some content out. I might do a little bit of journalism-y stuff if I get the chance. Honestly, I know what also is coming up is we've got some family obligations. We've got like a wedding to go to and a little holiday plan with some friends, but that's sort of towards the end of October, so a little while before that one. But still looking.
We'll grab you back before that then.
Yeah, exactly. So otherwise, a little bit freeform for now.
Myself, probably gonna make some YouTube videos. Might force you two to keep talking, even if you.
We'll do something.
I'll wrangle you one way or another. We'll do some content in some fashion or not around DFM and probably play in stage. Outside of that, I don't know. I'm I keep typing out, but now I'm up to just too many hours of words about Magic the Gathering. So one day my thesis will come out. It's becoming a short book at this point. My partner's recommending I just release it as a book now, and I'm like, no one would read that. No one would read it but me and my father, and maybe Sam, just for
Yeah, I'll probably
your
tell you, like,
curiosity.
Sam, could you edit this? Like, yes. Fine.
Yes, just edit a book now, sir. Hello, be a book editor. But yeah, follow our socials. MaskedSwan, Initialise with a 1, and at
That's me.
Nymaera. With that said, thank you so much for listening and/or watching, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, and we'll see you all very soon. Bye
Or
bye.
else. Woo! Oh my god.